I'm going to call this 1:30 meeting to order at 1:33. Would you stand with me and let's recite the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Denham. Here. Fenton. Cooper.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Howden. LeBlanc.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The agenda item will be led by Chief Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a study session and an open discussion on panhandling and homelessness. You provided a list of concerns from the board and we'll try our best to address those today, and I've got some people with us today that will help as well in that discussion. The layout, we're going to first kind of talk about panhandling, some of the restrictions we have placed on us by the courts, some of the enabling things that we have as far as the city ordinance goes for enforcement action, and then we're going to move to a broader discussion on homelessness and some of the things that I anticipate the board will be pleasantly surprised of some of the action plans that are already well in place because of our community resources that are here with us today that are partners in this endeavor. I want to first start off by three quick points. The first one, homelessness is not illegal, so it doesn't fall within our realm in the police department. However, we're often the first point of contact when we're dealing with homeless issues. It's not the homelessness that we deal with, it's the behavior associated with it, the criminal trespass or the stealing or whatever issues go with it. So a lot of times we're the point of contact between that person in need and the resources to help that person. So that's the reason why we stepped up to do this discussion today. The second thing about homelessness, I don't really believe homelessness is within the mission focus, the focus mission of the municipality. We can be a partner with our community resources, but I don't necessarily believe that addressing the homeless is part of our focus mission as a city. Like I said, I think being a partner with somebody who has better resources to deal with the issue may be there. And the third point is that encouragement of we have partners in the community that are working every day to try to address these issues in our community. And today I believe you will hear a recommendation from Brian Stallings on how to best address the panhandling, that if we get some movement on that, will make a difference in the community. I provided Lisa a copy of our soliciting ordinance. I talked about the limitations that we have placed on us by the courts and then the enabling that we have through the ordinance. The courts have looked at solicitation over the years through the lenses of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Now, you got to remember that the Constitution was not written for people like me in the police department. The Constitution was written for the people to protect them from people like me. So when you look at the way the courts have interpreted panhandling with the sign, that sign represents the First Amendment freedom of speech. I cannot regulate that sign. That sign can say whatever it wants on the public place, and I can't do anything about it because that's part of the freedom of speech through the Constitution. But I'll draw your attention down to F on the first sheet of that document, where it deals for reasons of public safety, it shall be unlawful for a person to stand or enter upon a roadway. The courts have allowed us the latitude to take enforcement action when somebody walks into the roadway outside of a crosswalk for the reasons listed there. And one of them down toward the bottom is to accept a contribution. So that's what we, and the only thing that we can address when it's dealing with panhandling on the typical corners that we see. There's another provision in there that deals with aggressive panhandling. We've seen one incident of that since I've been here, and it was down on Main Street downtown where a solicitor was on the crowded sidewalk and demanding of people, and we took action there. We don't see that a whole lot, but we do have the aggressive panhandling prohibitions in there. So when we see panhandling, we actually have to see the person step into traffic, accept the contribution, and at that point it becomes something that we can deal with a citation and take enforcement action. A couple of years ago, when our staffing was a little bit different than it is right now, I actually paid overtime to put officers in covert vehicles to watch for panhandlers in the street because of the traffic flow that we have and people looking at a fork through a spaghetti ball or whatever going down 76 and maybe not seeing a pedestrian in the roadway. So it is, in our mind, a public safety issue when somebody ventures into the roadway outside of a crosswalk. We have not had those covert operations in a while, other than a guy like me that happens to be coming and going and have some additional time. And I'll sit at an intersection sometimes and call for an officer to take action when we see it in the roadway. But typically our officers don't have a lot of time to do that. We have agreements with a lot of property owners where they have given us a letter of enforcement. So if a property owner has control of whatever property somebody is standing on to solicit, that letter of enforcement gives us the ability to enforce the criminal trespass statutes so that that person is on their property, and that letter of enforcement tells us we have the authority to tell them to leave, and if they fail to leave, then it becomes a criminal trespass issue. And we have those, Branson Hills, Shepherd of the Hills, we have them different places. The couple of big areas that we have for panhandling, 76 in Gretna, Green Mountain and 76, those are all public access right-of-ways. So we don't have the ability to have that letter of enforcement there. Some cities have been successful in combating panhandling through design and redesigning the intersections, the sidewalks and things like that to make it more pleasing to the eye, less pleasing to standing there for soliciting. We sent one of our sergeants, Eric Waymar, through a certification course on engineering for crime prevention, engineering through design, to seek crime prevention measures through design. And we've actually sat down and had conversations with Public Works and other ones on the redesign of 76 and Gretna 165, that interchange, if we ever go to rebuild that, to do it in a way that we're designing that intersection for safety, but we're also doing it so that we don't have the panhandling issues designed in there. A big wall for somebody to sit on. If you go down by Subway, Green Mountain and 76, there's an old light standard, just the concrete light standard that makes a great bench for somebody to sit on. So we have ways environmentally we can put bushes and things like that to try to combat some of that. You'll hear from Brian Stallings, his plan, and like I said, if we get some movement on his plan, I think we'll truly make a big difference in panhandling, and it addresses the issue of panhandling through the support community organizations that are partnered with us in that endeavor. Several years ago, when I got here, we started tracking panhandling, and Mayor and Alderman Denham, you've been to our ComStat meetings downstairs, and this is one of the things that we look at on a monthly basis and where we are. These are our last 2 years and year-to-date 2022 on where we are with panhandling incidences in the city. In 2018, we actually created the Soliciting Panhandling Call for Service, and we track them on a regular basis. So this tells you kind of where we see the most, and I think all of us would just assume that it's weekends when our traffic is up, but actually you can see that the data shows that it's during the week where we're seeing the biggest number of panhandling incidences. Let's shift, if we can, to homeless. These are some basic definitions of homeless, and I think it's safe to say that a homeless could be sheltered or unsheltered. And we've got the experts that can drill down into those definitions. But if you look at the definitions, it's basically, I don't have a home address. I don't have a permanent address to call mine. The statute down at the bottom, a homeless child, that's in one of the child abuse statutes that lays out a person under 21 who lacks a fixed or regular or adequate nighttime residence. And that's a legal definition that's in the state law just for somebody under that age group. So there are definitions that are out there, and we see the persons that are staying in the hotels over time that may lack a permanent address like you and I have. And then we also have a population that Brian will talk about in some detail that live beyond those walls of those hotels and may live in a pup tent in the woods. And we'll talk about those as well.
So Chief, just for clarity, in some of our extended stays, those families may or may not be considered homeless, right? I mean, we could have both in the extended stay properties.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would think so, because if you look at the definition, permanent address, they're the experts. They'll come up and talk about it.
Thank you.
As well. But I have a hard time in some of your scenarios, Mayor, that you've talked about, walk into a hotel room and see a couple of kids sleeping in a bathtub. If you look at the definition of somebody under 21, is that adequate, you know?
Yeah.
General statistics from 2019 pulled off the internet about Missouri-specific homeless numbers, and I think we all can agree that since COVID, when we're in the post-COVID era, those numbers are probably elevated from when we were in 2019 across the state. And the number that jumps out to me is the bottom number, unaccompanied adults 18 to 24.
Chief, when was this, what are these numbers from?
2019.
These are 19, okay.
2019 numbers, state of Missouri only. And then Branson specific numbers, Brian and his team, they keep a fairly accurate count. And he will tell you that the number fluctuates through the year. And I don't want to steal his thunder, I'll let him address those. But this picture is actually off of one of our body cameras, and this is just outside of our city in a camp that we're trying right now to clean up with our partners. So let me introduce Brian Stones. I think everybody knows him, Elevate Branson, and he and his team are doing a great job in addressing some of the community's needs as it relates to unemployment, homelessness, and helping people get to where they need to be. Go ahead.
Chief, before we do, Lisa from Taney County Health is here.
She is.
Oh, hi. She has a 2:30 board meeting to attend, so she has a limited amount of time she can be here. If you wouldn't mind.
Sure, come on
I
up.
would like to get her expertise and opinions before she has to run off. Thank you. And Lisa, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll keep this brief. I know there's a lot of great information to be presented. So I spoke with the mayor quite some time ago about our community health assessment. So that is something that we offer.
Lisa, excuse me a minute.
Yeah.
The people online aren't able to hear
Okay.
you.
Perfect, thank you.
He's an expert.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
The mayor and I had spoke quite some time ago about the community health assessments that Taney County Health Department provides to the community every 3 to 5 years. And so this is when we take a pause and we reach out to community members. We do a lot of surveying, a lot of key informant interviews. And basically, we ask the community, what are the health needs that you all are seeing, are hearing, are feeling, and are needing to be addressed over the next 3 to 5 years? And so that's really where we kind of come into the conversation, is that we are in the midst of that right now. And so we have done quite a bit of surveying in our community. We've also spoken to many community partners and key informant individuals throughout the community. Preliminarily, we are finding that housing, affordable and obtainable, are coming to the top of the needs that our community is identifying. We're also seeing that substance abuse and misuse is also bubbling to the top. And the third one is going to be mental health. And so we're definitely seeing those 3 issues as being very predominant in those conversations. And in terms of our surveying, it's what our community residents are also saying are the top health issues that our community needs to address. And so that was kind of where the conversation started, is that, these issues dovetail. And we're definitely seeing a need not only from the data standpoint or from the community partner standpoint, but also our community residents are saying that as well. And so that's something that we had talked about in terms of just what the health department will be looking at moving forward, and a lot of our community partners also join us in that effort. And so those are things that we're looking forward to moving forward here in the near future. And of course, with the housing issue, we definitely see that, as the chief had said, it's not just those that are in the extended stay, it's sheltered and unsheltered. And so we want to be sure, as we're taking that conversation forward, that we're certainly considering all of our homeless population, both of those groups, so that we can be sure to address our health needs. Because in many situations, these are our frontline workers. These are people that are serving our visitors, they're serving our residents. They definitely deserve healthy and safe living conditions, and so that's where we want to be sure that we're encompassing everybody in that conversation. And one of the other little-known facts that the mayor and I discussed also previously was birth certificates. So a lot of times that is a big barrier to getting into the workforce. When you don't have a home, you typically don't have the documents you need to get birth certificates, driver's certificates, and get yourself into an employment type situation. So those are definitely things the health department does offer birth certificates. We also work with our community partners to help get those that may not have the means or resources or even paperwork needed to get in that process. We help them with that as well. So just a couple of things that we are working towards. Also just some supporting information for this, this need for homelessness to be looked at in a solutions light. It's definitely something that our residents are saying that is a major health concern for our community.
We visited a few times on this topic. The fact that Taney County Health provides birth certificates, is there a fee for that?
So there is a $15 fee. However, we do have some agreements with some of our social support agencies in the area, so that if we've got individuals that cannot afford that and that is a barrier to get them into employment, we work with them on that. And I'm sure Brian will talk a bit more about that.
Okay.
They're one of our primary partners, but we definitely try to work through that barrier because we don't want to stand in the way of somebody gaining employment. Yeah,
and I'm confident Brian will be addressing this, but I learned so much of the services that Taney County Health provides. We need to, somehow, and maybe it's being done, we need to have that communication to those that are right. They're not reading the newspaper, they're not online, they're not reading our press releases. So effective ways to communicate that is a key.
Absolutely, and we do work quite a bit with our community partners. I know Marietta is here with Own It, so that's a great sharing resource to get that out to the folks that they're serving with all of their partner agencies as well.
Any member of the board have any questions for Lisa?
Is there a way, you mentioned that you can help, like if they need a birth certificate and they're not able because of the fee, is there a way a business like mine or somebody could donate that would be specific to helping with something like that, like a sponsorship or a donor? Or
We'd definitely be open to that conversation. If there are individuals that is a barrier, we would funnel them to one of our community agencies that we partner with through that program. But certainly we'd be willing to talk about that.
so would they come to you or?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep, because it may be a small thing, but somebody in that position, they may be embarrassed to say, I can't afford $15, right? So if we could remove that as even a little obstacle.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to stand in the way, so we want to be sure people are getting employed if at all possible.
Lisa, thank you so much for coming down. I know we're pushing your schedule, but we appreciate what you do so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor, before Brian comes up, just one more point that I'd like to make about the collaborative nature of all of our support groups in the community. They interface on a regular basis. And if I, as a citizen in need, go to one, they're communicating those services that they provide to me to the other service organizations that are out there, so that I'm not necessarily duplicating services throughout the community, and they're well connected. So I just wanted to share that. Brian?
That's so important, Chief. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. hope we have enough time for this today because, poverty and homelessness is a complex issue. It's not a complicated issue. It's complex. And so the difference is, if you're going to repair a jet engine or figure out what the problem is with a jet engine, that's complicated. But once you figure it out, it can be replicated. Complex means that one solution doesn't fit everybody. And you're dealing with individuals, humanity, which is very complex. So there's a lot of layers to this that we can talk about. A couple of things, since we were talking about birth certificates. We have a program called Elevate Connections. It's kind of a one-stop intake process. So an individual will come in and they may be seeking an ID. They need to have a social security card. They need to have a birth certificate to acquire that ID. So if they are not born in Missouri, it can take a little bit longer to acquire that birth certificate. Missouri is relatively cheap, $15, but you get to California and Texas, they can be $25 to $40 for those birth certificates. Many people that come in don't have the finances to be able to do that. So we have a program that allows them to work on our campus and earn what we call reward points that they can then apply to the purchase of that birth certificate. And what that does is it keeps their dignity and value intact because they're earning that birth certificate. It also helps to make them a lot more responsible to hang on to that birth certificate because they've got skin in the game on that. And so we do that day in and day out. We provide transportation to the health department, to the DMV, to Springfield Social Security Office to help individuals acquire the documents that are needed to move forward, because we believe that the way to move forward is through employment, and because really poverty comes down to a lack of resources. And we think of poverty, we think of homelessness as being financial resources, but really financial is the last resource that a person doesn't have. A lot of your resources are relationship resources, right? And if I have a job, I have coworkers, I have relationships that when I hit a bump in the road, people can support me. So we believe that trying to get somebody empowered to employment is the first step in helping them climb out of poverty. Now, I can go into all kinds of stuff, but I'd really rather have you guys ask me questions, and I'd be glad to answer. And I got your questions, Mayor, so if you want me to address any of those on there, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, actually, that'd be great. And just so you know, we've allocated an hour to solve all these problems.
All these problems?
So we
Perfect.
have plenty of time.
All right.
Actually, the truth, and we have media in the room, so I prefer that quote not to be in public. Truth is, I am so glad we're starting this process. I see this as the start of the process, and I'm so anxious to hear from Marietta and some others to focus on some solutions and some action steps, knowing we're not going to solve all the problems, but start in the direction of addressing the ones we can today and have continued meetings to expand. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Let me pass this document out to you all. It is kind of our connections numbers. So it will show you the past couple of years of people that have come in for intakes. It will also show you where we're at currently this year. And it'll show you a number that says total assists versus unique individuals. So typically when an individual comes in, they don't come in for one issue. On average, they have 3 issues, and each issue takes about 30 minutes to move to a next step. So you'll see through May of this year, we have had 1,658 assists from 444 unique individuals. So I'll pass this around just so you guys can look at it.
And Brian, if appropriate, we have your permission to post this on our website under some facts.
Yeah, it's public information.
Thank you.
Chief was talking about the number of homelessness. So this kind of is where we capture all the data. So it could be anybody coming in looking for a birth certificate to anybody coming in just picking up mail or using a computer. Anything that they come in for, we track that. We estimate from our experience, we've seen on average 25 to 30 physically homeless individuals in the wintertime. So we see very few in the wintertime because up until the last couple of years, we've had no overnight shelter for them. So typically they had moved out of the area, maybe headed to Springfield. Those 25 to 30 are usually chronically homeless, have some mental health issues, or may be struggling with a substance abuse issue. We'll see that number go up significantly April through November, and a lot of it's very transitional. So people will be coming down here, they'll be looking for a job, they don't have any money, they'll camp out in the woods until they get that first paycheck, and then they may move on from there. So it's very transitional. We'll see that number sometimes get as high as 50 to 60 people, and then it kind of changes. You may have 50 or 60 in May, and you may have 50 or 60 in August, and they're not the same 50 or 60, right? They've moved out of the area or moved on somewhere. We also will see people doubled up in cars and sleeping under bridges and things like that. One of the things I will clarify about motels, as Chief said, you have two types of homelessness. You have sheltered and unsheltered. So the 25 to 30 in the wintertime, the 50 to 60 in the summertime is what we would consider unsheltered, physically out in the elements. The motels, by HUD's definition, if it is not permanent housing, it's considered sheltered homeless. And so many of the motels are considered sheltered homeless because they're not actually apartments or permanent housing. We estimate there's about 1,500 individuals and families, 400 to 500 of those living in those motels. We serve about 15 motels each week, about 600 meals, and you see a lot of kiddos in those motels. At one time, Branson Schools was picking up about 400 in their bus route system. So that's kind of the last place for people to go. So what we'll see oftentimes from a homelessness standpoint is they're evicted from a motel. Maybe it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, and they have an argument, and whoever the room is under, the other person's out. And so they may be out situationally for a few days before they can land on their next spot. Typically, we'll have families that will be able to go maybe past the rental time for a period of time looking for assistance. Unfortunately, with HUD's definition, there is not a lot of motel rent assistance for individuals. So ultimately, they either end up on the street, they end up at a neighbor's house, or they leave the area. And so we see a high transition rate in the motels. So that kind of addresses that. I do wanted to ask, how did we get here? We started doing this in 2008, had no idea the extent of the problems, because for the most part, it's been pretty much hidden until Panhandling kind of came to Branson and it became much more noticeable. But we got here from, I believe, this is just Brian's opinion, is that we've kind of had the perfect storm since about the mid-90s. We had low and seasonal wages for years, very much just service industry jobs. We've had no public transportation in those years and a lack of affordable housing. And so prior to COVID, we were actually pleading with a lot of our local businesses to raise their wages to at least be a living wage. So in 2019, that living wage was $11.02 for one person with no kids. Fast forward now past COVID, because of what we've experienced with the labor shortage, that living wage is $15.54 with no children. If you're a single parent with 2 children, it's $34.90. Now, where can you go in Branson and make $34.90 an hour? Nowhere, right? And so it's just become very difficult. I think one of the challenges, as we all know, is affordable housing. And for a developer to come in and build affordable housing, it just doesn't make financial sense. And as a community, we've got to figure that out. Now, as a city, maybe that means waiving some impact fees, maybe waiving some permit processes, public-private partnerships like what we're doing with Elevate Branson, or Elevate Community there. So I just think we've got to think outside of the box and be a little creative, because when you have affordable housing that's even 5 miles outside of the city limit, your low to moderate income people are not going to be able to live there when they have no transportation, which is what has forced a lot of people to live in these motels, because they're close. And they're older, they're 30 to 40 years old now, and you're not going to have your local or your tourists stay in those local motels. So it's just kind of this perfect storm, I believe, is how we got here. Let's see, let's find another question here from your list here, Mayor. What works? Here's some examples of what we have seen work. And that is helping remove barriers. You know, even if we pay for an individual to stay in a motel for a week, at the end of that week, what are they going to do? Right? So we can't just temporarily fix the problem. We have to look at the root issue and move them forward. So if money solved it all, you know, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in with our government, right? But we now have 1 in 5 Americans receiving government assistance, whether that's through food stamps, SSI, SSDI, all the different programs. They've spent millions and millions, trillions of dollars on poverty since the 50s, and it hasn't changed much. So money is not the answer. But if we can help people get their ID, get their social security card, get their birth certificate, help them maybe get access to showers, clean clothing so that they can apply for jobs, teach them those work skills that we believe will help equip them to climb the economic ladder. We also need to help people get access to physical and mental health services. Huge barrier there. We are seeing kind of a slow response to Medicaid expansion. I think they've got about 60,000 now that they have enrolled. They're trying to get 275,000 in that. So it's just difficult for somebody in low income to navigate government systems. And so it really takes a relationship. Research has shown us that a homeless individual will cost a community $30,000 to $40,000 each, based on calls for service, emergency room visits, and social services. Housing a homeless individual will reduce this amount to $11,000 annually. And when you can provide wraparound services such as that mental health, that physical health, that access to the social services, it can reduce it as low as $3,000 to $4,000. So housing, as we all know, is a critical element for us. Relationships matter. So charity without relationship is ineffective. So if you wanted to look at the government website, they would show you how many millions of people are enrolled in food stamps. But if I were to back a truck up on the strip and hand out $5 on Tuesday and had 50 people show up, and on Wednesday I had 100 people show up, and on Thursday I had 200 people show up, is that effective charity? No. It's just more people are coming to get what I have to give them. So relationships are how we're going to move people. That is authentic. We get in the trenches with them. We have to come side by side with them, and we have to teach them skills that they may never have learned. You know, in the 70s, we started to really see a downfall of the family. Single moms were now working. You had latchkey kids. Dads weren't present in kids' lives. And so therefore, they don't know a lot of the simple skills that many of us just take for granted. Things like how to apply for a job, how to show up for an interview, how to dress for an interview. We have to help teach those skills again to our low-income individuals. I think we need to look at evidence and outcome-based solutions and not be just numbers-driven. In a perfect world, if we were to look at numbers of, say, people that were receiving food, that number, if it's effective, should actually be driven down. Typically, we celebrate every time it goes up. We need to change that mindset. What doesn't work? We talked about handing out money. Poverty is not a financial issue, it's a relationship issue. Unless we cut off the money flow to panhandling, it will never go away. We've got to cut off the money flow. Our experience, our belief is that give-and-go items such as food, clothing, and tangible things does not work. This typically robs individuals of their self-worth and dignity, often leading to more dependency and even entitlement. We don't believe anything free should be given out unless it's emergent. Emergent would be either house burns down, there's a tornado. Because in reality, that's not the world economy that we live in. And so are we teaching someone by giving them something free that they can go to Walmart and get that for free? Because you can't. I had a lady come in that had asked for toiletry items. And I said, that's great. We've got a rewards program here, and you can earn those things and earn points, and then you can go shop in our thrift store for that. And she looked me straight in the face and said, I don't want to earn it. I said, you're not going to get it. And she left. So how bad did she really need that item? Section 8 and housing first models don't work. If you don't have wraparound services on site, you will see an increase in calls for service. And affordable housing, as I talked about, more than about 3 miles away from public services, just isn't going to work here without any public transportation. So some of the things that we've tried in the past, what I've experienced has been very reactive. And typically we see that in healthcare a lot, right? It's diagnose and treat. We're very reactive to it. And we've got to plan and prevent. The problem with planning and prevent is it's hard to show the results until it actually happens. But that's the way we've got to think, or we're going to continue to perpetuate this. And I do believe Branson is kind of at a tipping point. Because if you see more and more individuals on the corners, tourists may not want to come. And if tourists don't come, we're going to see more and more individuals in our community struggling. So it's this combination of things that could result in a struggle for our community. So let's talk about how can we help some of these individuals actually gain employment. Some major cities, such as Phoenix, Denver, they're self-insured. They are able to actually hire their homeless individuals to actually do some work on a daily basis, like picking up trash, pulling weeds, landscaping, and things like that. Because being self-insured, they don't have to worry about some of the liabilities when you're not self-insured. So that's just one option I think that could be explored. Again, panhandling will not be stopped until we reduce the flow of cash. There's several articles of research out there that say 98% of panhandlers are either in an addiction or gaming the system.
What percent, Brian?
98%, as high as 98%. One of the challenges that we face with panhandling is that it gives people in need a bad name, right? Because we are truly trying to help people move forward in life. Many times you can offer services to the individual that's on the street corner flying a sign. They have no intention of coming and using your services because they can get money for whatever it is they're trying to fuel. But in the grand scheme of things, the community looks at that as all homeless individuals, right? And so it can just be a bad example of really what some of our community members are really needing. In 2019, we had actually developed a rough draft of an anti-panhandling campaign, kind of based on what the city of Joplin did. So the city of Joplin put together a community effort, billboards, radio ads, just really getting the business community involved and targeting some of the major intersections where they were seeing the largest amount of panhandling. They measured the results after the first year and saw a 44% decrease in panhandling. And so we feel like there is some viable options to it. Obviously, the majority of givers to the panhandlers are not locals, they're tourists. And so we're gonna have to educate our tourist community as they come in that there's other ways to give. And it's not to say that we don't want people giving, but many times when we give to the panhandler, we feel good about that gift, right? That's why we do it. I feel good, I helped this person out. But if you don't understand what your gift does, there can be deadly consequences to that. So again, research shows as high as 98% of individuals are either struggling in addiction or gaming the system. So my $10 gift to this panhandler on the street makes me feel good. If that panhandler goes and buys a bag of heroin that's laced with fentanyl and overdoses and dies, should I still feel good about that? So I think we have to educate people as to why not to give, because we could actually be hurting those individuals instead of helping them. And so we put together a campaign with the help of Ann McDowell to roll out in 2020, and COVID hit, and we didn't have to do it because all the panhandlers went away. But now they're coming back, and we may need to look at that again. But it's got to be a community-wide effort, and it won't be quick. It's going to take time. It's going to take money. It's going to take people to do the work. And so I've got a draft of it, and I'd love to give you a copy. What questions can I answer for you, Mayor?
I'd like to open it up for members of the board to ask questions.
Chief just reminded me, going back to IDs. So we are part of HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System. So what that means, if somebody comes in, they're homeless, we can enter them into HUD's information management system, and we can try to look for housing for them. But one of the features that allows us to provide is an ID. And so while it's not a valid driver's license or a valid Missouri state ID, it could be utilized as a temporary ID until they actually acquire their ID. And so it captures some of the basic information, you know, their name, their date of birth. We're able to validate a lot of times through that system if they're already in there, if they're not in there, and they have maybe a criminal record, we can get information from Department of Corrections that will validate who they are. And we have already started vetting some of the motels and the community that if they would accept this as a temporary valid ID until their actual ID came in. And most of them have said yes. We've talked with Chief Matthews at Branson PD, because oftentimes when you run into a homeless individual, they have nothing. They no ID, no birth certificate, nothing. And so this would at least provide them some form of identification. So we have started that process as well.
Well, I know the importance that you provide our community is you work firsthand with all of these issues. And so having that experience is literally priceless versus just looking at it from the outside. So I really appreciate all that you're sharing. Any questions?
Brian, do you guys do any work with as far as helping these people relocate back to their families? Where were they? I mean,
Yeah, so we don't necessarily pay for a bus ticket unless they work on our campus and earn it, then we'll help pay for a bus ticket.
Right.
But what we do is that should be their first connection point. So when we're doing an intake with them, we're going to ask them, do you have family? Mm-hmm. Where is your family? You know, how long ago have you been in contact with your family? We had a gentleman that he'd been in our area for a couple of years. He hadn't spoken to his brother in 10 years. And we asked him, why have you not spoken to your brother? Oh, we got in a fight. He doesn't want to hear from me. We ended up tracking him down, getting him on the phone. Well, guess who started providing assistance to him? His brother, right? Haven't spoken to him in 10 years, wondered where he was at. So good to reconnect. And that's what we want to do instead of always coming to the rescue as social services or individuals. Family needs to be the first point of contact. Now, when they don't have family, then we have to start working our processes.
Right. Well, I mean, I talked to a pastor about this. You know, what would you recommend? He goes, find their family, find somebody that loves them, can help care for them and help them.
Yep.
You know.
Sometimes harder to do.
Yeah.
We have a lady who her whole life was taking the caretaker for her mother. She's 32 years old. Her mother passed away. She ends up in a motel. Never worked a job. Enters our job program, graduates, gets a job. Now she ends up in the hospital. No family, no contacts, right? So we become her family. So there are situations where that does change. But that is the first thing you want to do is try to track down
Right.
the family.
And what I'm hearing you say as far as the pan, and you're right about people associate those as the same,
Yeah.
the panhandlers and the homeless, and it is different. And so what I'm hearing you say though is you don't, I mean, kind of like the scenario is like, you know, you feed a stray cat milk, they're going to keep coming back for milk, right?
Sure.
So you're saying by doing that, you're probably making that, you're just feeding into that, and it's never going to go away because they're just getting stuff for free day after day after day.
And more will come.
Right, right. So helping them, like you say, with the birth certificate, and I love the rewards program because, like you say, you're giving them self-worth and giving them a reason to want to work and earn the stuff. So, I mean, and I see on your chart here, on the rewards, I'm sorry.
Rewards
The
program?
rewards program, you have 369 year-to-date.
Yep.
So when you say rewards program, are they only, they're earning rewards to use at your facility? Or are they getting cash to go to another store or?
No, to use through either at our facility or a service that we provide, like paying for their birth certificate.
Okay.
Or paying for their ID.
Right.
Or transportation to CAM or Salvation Army.
So it could be used with partners you have
Yeah,
outside of the.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's 369 out of 444. So you can see a large percentage do the rewards program. Mm-hmm. And I've just seen it work. We had a lady come in that she wanted a pair of pants for her husband because he had a job interview and she knew we had a thrift store. So she says, hey, do you think I could get a free pair of pants for my husband because he's got a job interview? No. But we're packing a bunch of meals today, and you can volunteer over there, earn the rewards, and then go down and shop. And when she came in to ask me that, her head was down, and she was kind of embarrassed to ask, for free pants. After she packed those meals, her shoulders were back, her head was up. She came back with the pants and said, look what I just bought, and I'll be back tomorrow because I want to get my son a pair of tennis shoes. Mm-hmm. We all feel better when we earn something.
And do you feel, and I've heard people say, and I've said it, you know, when you pass a panhandler, well, if they got time to stand there for 8 hours holding a sign up, don't they have time to work 8 hours?
Well, and so now we're looking at really two different segments, right? Because again, the panhandler, 98%, are not there to move forward. They're there to fuel an addiction
No, that's
or,
what I'm
or
saying.
game the system, right? Versus somebody struggling in poverty or in low income. They're on more of a trajectory to get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, also the mindset for the panhandler is they are working. So many times they'll tell me, I'm going to go fly my sign for 2 hours, I'm going to work. You know, and they feel like they're earning their 40 to 50 bucks so they can go buy their bottle of booze.
And also in that same statement, when you say that, they may be how many would you say that, yeah, they're available to work, but maybe not capable?
Sure.
Mentally, maybe, physically, I mean.
Yeah, so work's going to look different for everybody, even the ones that come in for us. So when we do that initial intake on them, if they decide that they want to use our rewards program to earn whatever it is, they may not have the physical capabilities to mop the floor.
All right.
So we're going to find a job that they have the ability to do and accommodate them, because it's not so much about the tasks they're doing, it's about the fact that they're earning it. And so it may be as simple as folding papers. You know, if they can't physically do a lot of things, we'll find work for them to do so that they can earn that reward.
That rewards program is so smart, so innovative. And like you said, it puts the value back in them.
Yep, it does. We also work with about 150 different area partners, so not just in Branson, but Springfield as well. So again, poverty is very complex. We don't want to do it all. We can't do it all. And so we partner with other area organizations and agencies, and we'll refer them to those organizations and usually provide that transportation if they're willing to go into that next step.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for what you and all the other organizations in our community are doing to help those in need. Any partnerships that you know of whose main focus is just the transportation so that the people that want to work actually can rely on that?
Haven't found anything yet. Now, we are trying to bring a transportation option next spring, and so we've got several grant applications to help fund that. We think that will be a step in the right direction, at least to provide some low-income to moderate-income individuals mobility, and also give them the autonomy to be able to do more than just ride a shuttle, but actually, you know, have access to medical care, to go grocery shopping, to do those different things.
That was that scooter program
Scooter
that you
program,
introduced.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yep. Hey, Brian, on that, excuse me, on the 98% of addiction and just gaming the system, do you have a further breakdown on that? Like,
I
where
don't.
does that fall?
It's really tough to get that actual number because you know it's hard to get the individuals that are panhandling, to be honest. So you just have to Google different studies out there
Right.
that have been done.
Yeah, I actually had some clients come into my office that actually volunteered down at your place, and she told me of a story where she was seeing someone that was kind of panhandling and offered to take her to lunch, and she said, "Oh, I'm not leaving my corner. I haven't met my quota for the day." And I was just kind of like, that's fascinating that she actually has a plan.
Yeah, if we could just put her in the right sales job, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for everything that you do, Brian. Appreciate
bet.
it.
I can give you some information on our rewards program as well, and that way you can refer folks.
I wish I had that 26 years ago. I could have put my kids on the rewards program.
What other questions do you have? I would love to be able to help guide or answer or.
Brian, could you talk a little bit about your project that you're working on as far as elevate the community?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we were able to get the engineer on board late February, and We are working through an easement issue with the property owner to the east of us. So to get gravity flow sewer, we need an easement. That property is in a family trust, and so we've been working with them for the past couple of months, and hopefully I will hear something on Tuesday. And once that is completed, then the engineering can kind of move forward again, and hopefully we can get it out for construction soon. So.
Chief, do you have on your list for us to hear from Marietta?
Yes, sir. Any other questions for Brian?
We will.
Okay.
Don't leave the building.
All right, I won't.
Before he gets too far away, he talked about his identification program through HUD. He's the only game in town that has access to that federal database, so we're in contact with him quite often with that program. So, Marietta is the next one. She wears many, many hats in the community. She's here today as the chair of the Own It Ozark Wellness Network, and that's a group of 40 or so public and private entities that come together to solve issues in our community as it relates to all of the things that those service organizations handle. Marietta?
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi.
Thanks for allowing me to come and share some of what I've learned about our community. So I've lived here since I was 10. I've been an employee of Cox Health for 15 years now, and the last 6 years I've gotten to serve as the project coordinator for the Substance Use Initiative. So that's really where my full-time day-to-day job lies. But as a part of that role, I also get to serve in the community by being a part of different coalitions and different task forces that are working on things that address the root causes of substance use. So typically substance use is a result of other things, whether that is trauma or poverty or other life challenges. And we're never going to make headway on prevention of substance use issues if we don't start addressing some of those social determinants of health and those root causes that are driving people to use substances to cope or to self-medicate for issues that they're having. So as a part of that role, the Ozarks Wellness Network is a group that I've been a part of for the last 5 years, and I'm currently serving as chair. And basically what we do is every month we get together a group of the organizations like Elevate Branson and all of the other social service agencies that are working in our community to share information, to collaborate. Sometimes we work on projects together. Sometimes we have trainings about a new service that's available or resources that may benefit the people that they serve. We have a lot of sectors that are involved in that group. I will say that we do not currently have anyone from the city of Branson or the sector of public safety, so we would always love to have someone engaged in that capacity. We do have representatives from the Children's Division, Adult Protective Services, and some other government offices, but no one specifically from city of Branson. So
That will change. Thank you.
great. I'll be happy to send you that invitation. So what we try to do is just come together and talk about what challenges the agencies and the representatives there are encountering, and then sharing that information. When Chief asked me to be a part of this, I wasn't really sure, what my role in that would be, but I think it's just mostly sharing what I've learned through participation in the Ozarks Wellness Network, through the lens of the questions that you asked. So as Brian said, serving the needs of those experiencing homelessness is very complex, and a lot of that is because people are individuals, and we're messy, right? We're very messy. Even those of us not experiencing homelessness can say we're messy, and we have a lot of things that challenge us. But by experiencing homelessness and substance use, you often engage in activities that then lead to compounding those messes. So every time you receive a citation from the city for panhandling, or you receive time in jail, those are barriers that then keep you from accessing resources on the other end. So if someone is in crisis and is seeking housing, they have a very difficult time finding that housing if they have a felony on their record. There's very few housing providers that will work with people in that situation. And then also the financial burden that that leads to. A lot of the people that I have the opportunity to speak to in recovery talk about how difficult it was to overcome all of the legal and financial things that were a result of their substance use. It just keeps putting up those barriers. So I agree. I don't think homelessness is something that can be addressed by citing people, by arresting people. It's really got to be a community effort. And I say a community effort because we all play a role, and unless we are working together, we're not going to make progress as a community. And thankfully, there's some really great things happening in our community already. One of the other hats that I get to wear is to be a part of the Ozark Mountain Country Cares group. And that group came out of the Poverty Initiative. So they did some research, they got a grant, did some research on our area, identified what some top needs in our area are, and now they are leading 5 different work groups that are here in the community. One of those is called the Caring Community, and that's just basically focused on mobilizing volunteers and churches and collaboration. There's also a housing work group, a transportation work group, a job skills work group, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. I'm sure Susan can. Life skills, job skills and life skills. And so that is some work that's already being done in the community. As a part of that, some wins. You asked on here some examples of other communities that maybe have addressed this in a different way. I would encourage you, and I can share these links afterwards. I apologize I didn't bring printed out stuff to hand out. But the Greenville Homeless Alliance in, I believe it's Greenville, North Carolina, part of the directors of the poverty group went to visit that community because they have a very innovative way of addressing homelessness in their community. And they brought back a lot of lessons and actually used some of the things that they learned there in order to set up Ozark Mountain Country Cares and the way that they set it up. Brian also mentioned the Housing First model. It is an evidence-based model, but he's exactly right. Housing First really requires that wraparound services. So it's great to get somebody in a home, but if you're not also allowing them access to the resources that they need for those case management and day-to-day just figuring out how to do life, right? Everything is so complicated. Sometimes I help my mom with things that, dealing with going to the doctor, and I'm just like, how would you do this if I wasn't here to help you? And it makes me think of people who don't have someone there to help them with it. I was talking to Hannah actually this morning from Elevate Branson, and I was asking her about the role of the Borough Behavioral Health has new housing liaisons here in our community. And I asked her, what is that role? And Elevate Branson's already partnering with them, but what she explained to me is that there are housing vouchers that people can receive from organizations like OCAC or Southern Catholic Charities of Southern Missouri. And basically they just hand a person a voucher and says, here, you have a month to use this for housing. The chances of them being able to go out, find housing that if they have a felony, will allow them to be a part of, have transportation to get around to find that housing, be able to navigate the complexities of signing a lease, doing a deposit, those kinds of things are very challenging, and they don't have very much time to do that. So the borough's housing liaisons are now working with Hannah as kind of that middle person, where Hannah connects with the housing voucher providers and then connects the person receiving it to the borough liaison, who then steps in to walk that person through the journey. So they take them out, provide the transportation, help them connect to the housing providers, and see about being able to actually use the voucher that they have in their hand that could pay for rent for them. But what good is that piece of paper if they can't actually get there and use it, right? So that's a couple of the different models that I wanted to tell you about. One of the great things that has come out of the collaboration of Ozark Mountain Country Care so far is that Susan and community partners were able to put together an emergency motel closure emergency response plan. That was something that they took away from Greenville, and basically what it does, we've experienced in our community several times where either an apartment or an extended stay motel has had to be closed down suddenly, whether that was for health code violations or city code violations. And what happens is 30 to 40 families are unhoused immediately. And what do you do with people in that situation, right? So the housing work group came together and they put together a plan where if that happens again, not if, when that happens again in our community, that we have specific points of contact. We have plans in place of how we can respond to that. And so that is the type of work that's already being done in the community that, yes, we need the city to be a part of and be supportive of. We have great partnership with the health departments. But like I said, not a lot of city. I know that Susan works very closely with Matthew Henry and others here at the city, but we would love more engagement to help kind of answer questions and point us in the right direction. Sometimes we have ideas that come up and we don't know, well, is that really allowed? Is that, and then it extends the process of us having to go and reach out to people and find out that information. So having someone there to help answer those questions would be very helpful. I did want to talk a little bit about the point-in-time count. You had asked estimates on the number of homeless people experiencing homeless here in our area. There's something called a point-in-time count that's done every year across the nation. It's on a specific day in January, and it tries to get an idea of how many people are actually unsheltered homeless. And we were, as a community, doing that. It was actually ran out of Elevate Branson in the years that it was being done, and they would go out on that night and they would visit the different camps and the places where they knew people were staying that were unhoused, and they would get an actual number. So just some of the past numbers, these are approximates. I talked with the lady that actually kind of headed those up during those years. In 2018, the number was around 20. 2019, it was around 84. 2020, it was around 90. And then in 2021 and 2022, due to COVID and some other challenges, they weren't able to do that count, but hopefully in the future, there is some interest in again, getting that back up. And so those are actually the people unsheltered, not the people living in extended stays at that very moment. It's one night in time, and it's who is considered unsheltered. That could include people living in tents, people also living in their cars. But that just kind of gives you an idea of what those numbers look like. House of Hope is also a great partner of ours. I was able to get some data from them. So from the beginning of this year to present, they have encountered 704 individuals, and that makes up 424 households. 20 of those were at risk of being homeless, so kind of that acute homeless situation rather than chronic homelessness. And then 100 were actually considered homeless. During the winter months, you asked some questions about having the cooling centers and the warming centers. So when House of Hope served as a warming center the last couple of years, their average night census was around 18. And typically they were getting referrals and actually people brought to the warming center and dropped off by police officers, by people from the hospital that were being discharged. The social workers would actually bring people over to the warming center so that they had a safe place to go after being released from the hospital. Currently, right now, as far as cooling centers, the Salvation Army is serving as a cooling center, and the Branson Senior Center is also listed as a cooling center. I know House of Hope does have facilities available where people can come in during the day and make appointments to have showers and do their laundry, and so that can kind of serve as a place to go and cool off while you do your laundry, or have some case management services provided for them. And same thing with Elevate Branson, people are able to go in there and use their rewards program and kind of get away from that. Some of you mentioned that Branson has a severe shortage of workers, and what are the things that can be used to put them in gainful employment? Of course, Elevate Branson's Job for Life program is the first thing that pops in my mind. They have such a high success rate of seeing people move out of poverty and into sustainable jobs in that program. The Job Skills Work Group, as a part of Ozark Mountain Country Cares, is also, they're focusing on two different aspects. They're focusing both on the K through 12 group, so making sure that our youth are being engaged with, looking forward for the future for that job market, but then also how can they support those that are already adults and needing some of that. So there is a work group currently working on that. But again, the challenges with the jobs comes up, especially for people who are experiencing homelessness or substance use disorders, is there are a lot of barriers besides having a driver's license to getting a job. A lot of employers won't work with people who have felonies. A lot of employers won't hire someone who is involved in drug court and has to go to have their urine drug screen done every morning and has to go to court and has to go to AA meetings or whatever those therapy sessions look like. So you really need an organization or an employer that's willing to be flexible. And we have several of those in the community. I'm so excited with the work that Uptown Cafe does, Downey Street Poorhouse. So there are some businesses that actually partner with the substance use and mental health providers in the area, and we can link them into employment. But those are some of the challenges that people are going to face, even if they have the paperwork that they need to legally get the job. I spoke with, I think it's very important as you continue as a city to look into this issue and see how the city can play a role in what's already happening, is to hear the voice of people who've actually experienced homeless. The first one that pops to my mind is Carla Perry. She's a great advocate in our community. She was homeless for many years and has really come out of that as a person who has a passion to help others through that. And to hear some of her story and just to understand that a lot of people experiencing homeless, again, have had trauma, have experienced continue to experience trauma, whether that's sexual assault or violence against them as they live here in our community. But I would really encourage you to hear some of those voices and hear their stories. The stigma that's associated with people experiencing homelessness and people who use substances is often a barrier for them to even seek help because they are so already ashamed of the situation that they may be in. And then they get the shame put on them by others. And so looking at this as they're not a problem to solve, they are people of our community, residents of our community that we want to lift up, right? So I encourage you to listen to their voices and to have them be a part of whatever it is that you would like to see happen, because if they don't have a part in it, then they're probably not going to go along with it, right? One of the models that I wanted to mention is very similar to what Brian mentioned with Elevate Connections in Springfield, the One Door program. They have the O'Reilly House of Hope, and the idea behind that is co-locating a lot of services in one building so that people with those challenges, they don't have to travel all over the city to access services when they don't have transportation. So the O'Reilly Center of Hope, it basically brings a lot of those agencies and partnerships into one location, and they can come there and get a lot of their needs met. Another challenge with engaging with people experiencing homelessness is it's not likely that you're going to see them again or that they're going to have the same phone number in a week. That's going to probably change. And so you may engage with them and they're like, yes, I want these resources, and you connect them to someone, but then that someone isn't able to get a hold of them. That transient nature of it just really makes it difficult. So what barriers can we remove as a community to make it easier for those who do want to access resources to be able to access them? Only two other things. I spoke with a community partner that works over at Restoration Connections, which is a church, Sanctuary of Hope, that does a weekly meal for people in recovery and for others. They have several people experiencing homeless that come to them on a weekly basis, mostly because it's a free meal, getting out of the elements, and you get to build community and trust. And she said for her, that is the biggest thing that she sees, is that a lot of people just come there for the camaraderie and the relationships that they build. But she said that what she's noticed is that she can maintain somebody and help motivate them for about 3 to 4 months. But some of these lists that they have to get on, for example, the HMIS system, they could be looking at a 12 to 18 month wait for assistance to get into actual housing. And it's really hard to motivate someone for that long. Typically what she sees is after 3 to 4 months, people are having a recurrence of symptoms because they've given up hope, their frustration level, they are gonna self-medicate with substances to deal with the stress of that lack of hope. And then the other thing that she wanted to mention was the importance of recognizing that people experiencing homelessness that have pets, that those are members of their family, and it is also a barrier for them to sometimes engage in some of the resources that are available. So there are a lot of people that she's talked to that are more than willing to go into a program or a treatment, but they are unwilling to part with their family member, which is their pet. And I know that seems silly to people, some people, but it's really all the family that they have sometimes. Right. And she said if there could be some kind of foster program or something where they could leave their family member with someone in a trusted area and then be able to go and take care of those needs and then come back, that would remove a barrier for several of the people that she knows of. I think that's it. Any questions?
Oh boy, I have a long list. What I would like to suggest is let's take a short break, and then do you have other speakers, Chief? One more? Let's take a short break, hear from the other speaker, and then with all of you, go through a laundry list of questions. Okay. Thank you.
Excedrin migraine, it helps some, but it's hard. You might find one.
Neck exercises. I don't know what you're talking about. I knew nothing.
Breaker 19. Come on back.
Okay.
Press.
Do we have everybody?
Just like you told us.
I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Chief, you're on deck.
Chad, I'm unable to advance it too. Can you advance it? There you go. The next speaker before you today, Mayor and Board, is Layla Cook with Burrell. And she is actually our second partner from Burrell. We created a partnership with Burrell back in 2018, 2019 to help address some of the overdose issues that we were dealing with and the trend upward in those. And now she offices with us 2 days a week and actually is able to go out with our officers and ride with our officers and handle issues in the field and conduct follow-ups of her clients in need that we have regular contact with the safety of having an officer with her. Today I talked to her as she was trying to have a few bites of lunch before this presentation, and she was actually telling me that as she left this morning with our police officer, the first 4 calls of service dealt with mental health issues. So she's here to kind of address the mental health aspect and what resources are available out there through Burrell and other entities to deal with the mental health issues that are prevalent in both some of the homeless and panhandling issues that we've talked about.
Sorry, Chief, what was her name?
Layla Cook.
Okay. Media wasn't paying attention, so that's good.
Hi. So my team with Burrell is actually a grant program through the state Missouri Behavioral Health Council. So we're put in place to intercept the recidivism of visits for mentally ill people to ERs with law enforcement.
No, yeah, just speak up a little bit.
Okay.
I just want to make sure everybody can hear that's
Okay.
listening.
The recidivism with visits to ER, law enforcement, and there was a third. So the one side of the team is the ERE. So a lot of times what I do when I get a referral from law enforcement or when I'm with law enforcement is I will have follow-up from one of my teammates that will stay with the individuals until we get them the resources they need. So typically, the most difficult part of our jobs are to convince people that are in denial that need help to actually get that help. A lot of times we're effective, but the difficult thing that we see with the homeless population is finding them, because we need multiple points of contact in order to get them what they need. So one of the things that we've begun doing is getting them the phones. And then I also I bring in resources from wherever I can. So there's a team within Burrell that's called EPIC, and they are all peers that have been in recovery. And I have brought them in quite a bit. There's a large issue with substance use among the homeless and the temporary sheltered and the extended stay hotels. I'm trying to think of what else I've done. I just drew it to them. I would say of the homeless population that I deal with, there's a great portion of them that are either so mentally ill or so engrossed in their substance use issue that they're not capable of doing much they're not capable of functioning. In fact, there's one individual, just for an example, there's one individual that is in extended stay that will acquire jobs. This person has the ID, transportation, everything that they need to acquire a job. But because of her mental health issue, they're not capable of holding that job for more than 3-4 weeks. So I guess my point is, one of the main barriers that I see for the homeless issue is getting the people the help that they need so that they can function. Oh no, do you have any other questions?
I was unaware we had that program, Chief. In fact, from all of our speakers today, there's a warm place in my heart knowing that all of these activities are taking place. And so I want to compliment Brian and Marietta and Leela and Chief and all the other, I know we have the Salvation Army representative here, for all the efforts that you're doing. I do have some questions I'd like to ask, and it's really, I'm not sure which one of you three would be the best, but since you're there, let me start off with you. I've had a vision, well, let me back up. We know this is a big national long-term problem, and I'm not the national mayor, I'm the mayor of our city, so I want to patrol my borders and do what I can and within our community. So I'm going to throw out what I wanted to do was what we've accomplished is get some of the education out there. Some of this information I think is invaluable that I heard, and I think this board had the opportunity to hear today. So again, thank you for that. I also wanted to see how many questions oh boy. If we can take this information and not just hear it and then move on, but if there are some action plans, some steps we can take, put things in motion to take this information and do something positive with it. So I'm going to embarrass myself with a couple ideas that I've had and get your responses, and you may be the best one to answer this one. I had a vision of myself and Marietta going to the panhandlers that are on the streets and go to them with open arm and olive branch caring mindset to discover what their situation is, why are they here in this position, what got them here, and at the end of the day, what can we do to help? Marietta, I highly compliment you for consolidating 40 different organizations. I think that's huge. So somebody with your knowledge, as we're visiting with these panhandlers, you would have the information after listening to their story, what their wants and needs are, of things that you know of services that could help these individuals. What I would anticipate would be we would then discover which of the panhandlers are truly down and out, right? They're struggling, they have no other options, and they're there just trying to survive, and offer them assistance. I believe we would also discover those that this is their full-time job, right? They're out there to make a living panhandling. I also had a vision of wearing a sandwich board with a sign on it that basically it was covered in Ann McDowell's letter here, a message of don't just give to this one person, why that's not healthy, why you want to give to a cause that'll make a difference. That quickly turned into, boy, they have a lot more, panhandlers have a lot more time than I do, right, to stand out there. But the intent would be to discourage giving. Then, Chief, I thought about maybe getting some city signs and placing them where the panhandlers traditionally hang out with a similar message, trying to redirect those that in their heart they want to give, but maybe direct them to giving for better causes, and as Ann explained in her project here, why it's unhealthy to give, right? With the intent of, if the panhandlers stopped receiving as many contributions as they received, they may move on. That would be the goal. So, listening to you today, we don't need to go through that physical process. You can tell me, what would I hear as the mayor if we went out and visited with these panhandlers? What responses are we going to hear?
From my perspective, I would say that you would get a fair mix. There are the people that are there trying to make a buck under the radar, but there's also people that cannot hold jobs because of their mental health issues.
Chief, did you want to add something?
Mayor, that's a fantastic question, and give you 3 examples of people that I've actually come in contact with. One, a gentleman out of Bandera, Texas, who was here with his girlfriend, had a domestic. She took the car and left. So now he's stranded, and we worked with social services to get him a bus ticket back to Bandera, Texas. But he was on the street corner for a couple of days trying to get that money on his own. Talked to a young lady just the other day at Green Mountain and 76 who was from Pittsburgh and had heard through the network Branson was a cool place to go. So she showed up in Branson, and she was actually sitting on the street corner drawing charcoal prints with the sign out there. It wasn't actively, holding a sign. She was drawing as she was sitting there. 2 other gentlemen that were living in an RV park on the west side of town, recently out of Missouri Department of Corrections, paroled back to this area, and the Panhandling provided them rent money for the night. And once they got that rent money and a little bit of money for food, they were done for the day. Back to the comment that you made up there about this is my corner, this is my job. When I'm done, I'm done. And you see all different types that are out there. Some that can't hold a job, like we were just told, that are just there to get their basic needs met for the day. And as Brian and others have talked about, when they're provided the opportunity for employment or social services, they turn those down because their needs are being met in their mind by the Panhandling.
If you don't mind, let me address that one,
Okay.
that scenario in particular. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but in this vision I had, when we run across those types, especially if they're at a property who has acknowledged or agreed to enforce the no trespassing, I'm assuming, I know we have some businesses that enforce that. If they were trespassed and our police took them to jail for trespassing, and they would go to Forsyth. I know our legal system right now that I'm not real tickled with. It's a revolving door. So they would be there for all of 10 minutes, and then they're let go. But when they're let go, now that I'm going to say this out loud in public, I'm going to catch some heat on this one. Yeah. Mayor of Forsyth, close your ears. If we brought them to Forsyth, it would be very inconvenient for them to find their way back to Branson. And if that's happened several times, would that be a vehicle to discourage those that are out trying to make a living panhandling?
I would say no. They're going to make their way back over here, and our officers can tell you those stories over and over and over again. We go to where we're comfortable in being. And if I'm successful on my street corner, like we talked about, I'm going to make my way back to my street corner, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do there. I think the true answer to this panhandling issue, and it's not something that's just specific to Branson. You can go to any community in the United
Sure.
States and see the same issue. Brian hit it on the head. When we can convince our residents and tourists not to drop $1 in somebody's pocket, if I have a need to give, let's give to the appropriate place and let that place help with resources. Mary, you talked about signs. I looked over at Keith earlier when you were talking about the signs. We've posted signs in the city.
Yep. They're too small. I don't mean to sound rude, but my wife and I talk about it often. Like, you can't even, it's like this big. I think it needs to be in your face. And like you said, not just don't. I think the sign says if you want to give, there are other outlets to give.
And a phone number, and yeah.
Yeah. I think the idea is great. I just don't think people notice them.
And we could look at sizing.
So maybe that's one action plan we can take from today's meeting is what if we made those signs large, obtrusive, and more of them to help get this message across?
We can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Mayor.
I just want to comment on that real quick.
Sure.
Chief, do you have speed limit signs out there? Does everybody obey those speed limit signs? So that's a good tool, but to make an impact, it's going to have to be community-wide. And you got to remember, we're trying to reach tourists as well. So tourists visit restaurants, they stay in hotels. They need constant messaging in front of them about why not to give. We've got to educate them that sometimes their giving is very harmful to the individual on the corner and that there's better ways to give, because signs alone won't do it. We've got to stop the cash flow, otherwise they're not going to move off those corners.
Brian, I completely agree with you. But I do think every little bit we do will
Absolutely.
help. So enlarging these signs, making them more prominent is a small step, but I think every step is
Yeah.
going to help.
But I wouldn't limit it to those signs, is what I'm saying.
No,
I would
no,
look
no,
at
no, I'm not saying
billboards.
that's the answer.
I would
I'm
look
just-
at a chamber-wide campaign. I would look at
I just
a
read
variety
this
of
letter.
methods, yeah.
This was a project prepared by Ann McDowell, February 7th of 2020. And this got derailed from COVID, right?
Right. It was something that we had just started to work on. I had actually even met with Melody, and then COVID hit, and we
Sure.
had more important things to
No,
look at.
I understand. I think part of this meeting is we do want to look for solutions and
Yeah.
some action plans. And what I read, what Ann put together, Ann, thank you very, very much. This campaign is named Have a Heart, Give Smart. And it is full of excellent, excellent ideas. Excellent ideas. I'm going to get this to the press and see if we can get them.
And that's just a draft. I think if
No,
we have a collaborative group, I think we can expand on that and make it even better.
Do you want to set up a meeting time to do that? I'm here to take actions.
You bet.
Okay.
Let's set her up.
Let's set it up, because I'll tell you what, and I'm going to beg Ann to participate.
Yes.
This is excellent information. Couple other topics, and I'm not sure who wants to address these. Let me go ahead and hit some big ones. Brian, you're running away. Come back, come back. Let's talk about CORE. I don't have much information on CORE other than what others have shared with me. And I know CORE provides a benefit. They work with the court systems. They have a rehab program. But what I'm hearing over and over again is the success rate of those that go to, that the courts pretty much say you either go to jail or you go to this program, right? There's two choices. So they go to the program, and a percentage, and I'm going to be off on this, but 15% success rate, something. But it's a small number. The 85% that fall out of the system, that don't complete the program, end up on our street corners and our homeless camps, right? So have there been any dialogue with CORE of, number one, understanding what their program is, and see if we collectively could reach out with an olive branch and discover ways to mitigate those that fall out of the system that end up in our city?
So I'm actually gonna defer that one to Marietta.
Come on,
because
Marietta.
she works more with the substance abuse recovery group network than probably I do. I have opinions and thoughts on it, but I will let Marietta speak to it.
CORE is not one of my main partners. I don't engage in a lot of activity with them, so I can't speak to their success rate. What I can say is, in relation to substance use disorder, is it is a very difficult medical brain disease, and you do see a lot of people with recurrence of symptoms, and some facilities such as CORE do have very stringent rules, and a lot of those rules are in place to protect those who are still progressing with the program, that if they have a relapse of symptoms, that they're no longer able to be there and have to be discharged from the program. That is not how all of those types of residences function. The one that I work most closely with is the Simmering Center. And I can speak a little bit more to what Simmering Center does. They are a NAR accredited, which is the National Alliance of Recovery Residences. It's a national certification where they have to meet specific guidelines in order to maintain that accreditation. And it ensures that people are treated in a respectful and fair manner. So I will just say that there's a very close working relationship between probation and parole and several of these organizations, and I would encourage you. I even thought that Assistant Chief Schmidt was having conversations with CORE at one point. Okay, so I know that there is some engagement with them, but just really stressing the point that a lot of the people that they serve are here from our area, and people are going to relapse and have those issues, and it's how do we then connect them. We don't just kick them out of that residence and say, oh, sorry, you're out of luck. How can we move forward as a community to say, okay, you've done this and you can no longer stay at our facility, but now we're gonna help you transition to a facility where you can get services from. And we don't have that facility in our area.
Yeah.
We don't have a respite home. We don't have a place where they can go and get detox if that's what they want. And so that is a barrier that we as a community need to look at, so that we don't just have to discharge them and then they end up, living in a tent or something like that.
So am I off base when I'm looking at the big picture? We are a small community. We don't have the resources that you described. Those resources are more available in the larger metropolitan areas, right?
Some of them.
But at 10,000 feet looking down at this, we're talking a lot about our panhandlers and our homeless, and how can we address that? My understanding is, or my feeling is, as long as we have vehicles that continue to bring in our eventual problems, until we can put a finger in the dam on that, this is going to be just a never-ending story.
I think that the underlying issues that our community faces, unless we start to address some of those social determinants of health that people are struggling with as a community, as a nation, we're going to see people ending up in those types of facilities, no matter if it's our community or a community down the road.
Let me say again, I'm the mayor of Branson.
Right.
Chief?
Two quick issues that you touched on. The courts go to Branson or go to jail to the recovery place. Once they're here, they're on probation, parole, whatever, those entities have no legal authority to ship them back to the court of jurisdiction. Probation and parole has no ability to ship them back. We have no ability as the city to regulate that establishment, that house. So legislatively, I think Lisa has scheduled legislative priorities coming up. Mayor, that may be a consideration for you and the board to look at to see if maybe our state legislators can give us some support in those areas to empower probation and parole to challenge the court to take those people back to their home jurisdiction after they have failed those programs, or enable the city or county in some way to be able to help regulate those homes, because it's my understanding right now, a lot of those homes lie in the county. We have very few in the city itself, but we have no regulatory authority over those.
Let me explore a couple roads with that. My understanding is those that come from the different courts, they come from cities throughout Missouri. They come from cities outside of Missouri. Is that true? Do you know?
I've not heard about outside of Missouri.
So you think it may be, okay. But a small community, it just seems unrealistic that I feel like our small community, we can, all these things we talked about today, we can address our problems, our homeless, our panhandlers, our residents. But we surely don't have the capacity to handle people brought in from all over the state of Missouri, right? So
Correct.
at the root issue, one is all the great things we talked about today, but as long as we have more coming into our community than we could handle, we could have all the best programs in the world, and this, we keep getting upside down.
You're very correct. You're correct in that statement.
And the solution, I'm here for solutions and action plans, and the solution is?
So I just threw out two, legislative support on
Legislative,
those two
yeah.
issues, right?
Yeah.
I think the program that you've talked about that Ann and Brian have worked on to address some of the panhandling issues is another one.
Yeah.
So those are action items right there.
Yeah.
Getting the city on the Own It committee is
Yeah.
another one. And I saw the notes that you asked Lisa to take on that one.
Yes. This Have a Heart, Give Smart, man, this is nothing short of brilliance to help address our issues. But there again, if we don't address the influx coming in, we're going to need bigger and bigger programs.
The network that I talked about that the young lady from Pittsburgh said, yeah, I heard Branson's a good place. Once we put some legs to some of these action items and we start seeing some successes in making it harder to make a living on the street corner as a panhandler, the word's going to get out. And that network will help us educate folks that maybe Branson's not the place to go. But we have to have some successes first.
I have a question, and maybe you can answer it. I don't know, Randy's here. I was looking over at him or Ted. And I really hate to go down this road, but I'm telling you, I'm willing to do anything here. On some of the core houses that are within the city limits of Branson, they have numerous occupants. I know of one in particular that I'm told just has a lot living in one household. Ted or Randy, is that a fair statement? Ted grits his teeth.
I don't have all the state statutes memorized, sorry, but I believe by state statute we have no regulatory compliance on that type of program in a residential occupancy.
But
Put that on your action plan.
are there any, but, so there's no maximum occupants in a single-family residential home?
Not from the International Fire Code that we manage. That'd be more commercial. I might suggest we put it as an action item to discuss deeper with our team, whether it be code compliance, if we need a code amendment, if we need to talk to the legislative body to make a
Speak a little
change.
bit
That's a future action item.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bless you. Bless you. Boy, there's many notes here that I want to address. Let me jump into another big one. I know I heard that our Branson Senior Center and our Salvation Army, they offer cooling centers and warming centers. Recently, this board and this mayor have been asked the question about Riley's Treasures. I have read the documentation of what's taken place at Riley's Treasure, and so let me just address a few things that I am aware of. We have naysayers, we the city, we have naysayers out there that are accusing this mayor and board of not having a heart, not caring, and we're going to kick all these people out on the street. We also have big shoulders. And I think because we get so many compliments and accolades for the good we're doing, we're always going to have those naysayers. But there's a fine line between caring and having a heart and life safety issues. I'd like to be corrected if I'm about to make a statement that's inaccurate, but a year and a half ago, Riley's Treasure, I understand Salvation Army closed their warming center, and Riley's Treasure had a warming center. And so, from the grace of God, they were given a reprieve, Riley's Treasures, to not have to conform with fire code of putting in sprinklers. It was during COVID, it was a crisis. There's no other way to say it, but whoever made those decisions, pretty much looked the other way and said, out of compassion, we're going to help that problem. I also understand that in doing that, it was a temporary solution, and that Riley's Treasures was given a year to come into compliance, which expired this past February. So now, I know Riley's Treasures. I'm 100% supportive of the warming centers and the caring, and I'm sure I can speak for this entire board when I say that. I'm asking you to put yourself in our shoes, because where the line comes in is I would not be able to look at myself in the mirror if we continue to look the other way and there was tragedy because we weren't enforcing our life safety codes. So when you, the community, when you look at this board, like I said, if you would put yourself in our shoes, life safety issues there should be absolute no exception, right? Those are things that actually affect life and safety. Then you have the compassion side. So I know there's been a few actions taken to try to help Riley's raise the money to put in a sprinkler system. This board feels very compassionate on the services that they provide, very, very needed services. I just can't imagine somebody being homeless in our community when our temperatures drop to, what is it, when we open up warming centers? 32. When it reaches 32 degrees or below, to be living outside, right? I mean, that's tough. So I know that Riley's Treasures has asked for an open for business meeting. I know the plan is to work with them, but I need the community to know entities like that, they just need to be in compliance for life safety issues. To ask somebody, this mayor or this board, to ignore that, and then if something did happen, because I'll tell you, those life safety issues are in place for a reason. To ask us to ignore that is putting, I think, an unfair burden on this board. Randy, do you have anything you want to add to what I just said? Did I hit the nail on the head? Okay. Anything you want to add, board? No? Hitting on topics nobody wants to talk about.
You're doing a great job.
I just made a note here that I know our panhandlers have the protection of the First Amendment, and I understand that. I also know that we have that same protection of First Amendment. So when we go with signage or go with things that discourage that practice, I believe we have those same rights to do that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I do want to make a comment about,
Speak into your mic, please.
you know, you as the mayor and us as a board, we talk about shouldering that responsibility of public health and safety. And, you know, you got the chief and Randy as firefighters, you know, they dedicated their entire lives to saving lives.
Pull this up just.
And and those decisions that they make when it comes to that life safety issue is weighed on the years and years of experience that they have. So I think, you know, these gentlemen that, you know, are you know, they're asked to sign off and approve of these things. And if one of those incidents happens, you know, these are guys that, again, have spent their life saving lives. Think of the burden that is upon them. And, you know, so I think, you know, as a board and you as the mayor, you know, we definitely are behind those life safety issues. That's the, you know, top of mind, number one thing that we do every single day when we make these decisions. And, you know, I just think in fairness that, you know, when these guys are making decisions, it's just not off the cuff. It's because they have the experience, they have the training, they have the continued education of knowing the incidences are out there and the possibilities of things that can happen. So, you know, I think, you know, it's incumbent that, you know, people understand that they're doing that because that's their job, to save lives, and that's what they're doing.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if this is for Brian. Brian, our state offers a program called, I believe it's pronounced SAFER? SAFER?
Safer. It's
Safer.
a federal program.
Yeah. Oh, federal program.
Yep.
Is that, I mean, I hear a lot about it. I hear that there's money available. They're trying to put the money out there. Can you share any wisdom of if there's anything we can do to help bring in some of those federal dollars?
You know, really from a community standpoint, ARPA is probably our best shot for community dollars. I know we've already had some allocated to us. The SAFER money is really kind of a temporary thing. It'll be exhausted eventually, you know, as a COVID housing prevention. But again, the problem is housing. So even though we can get somebody approved for it, it's finding them a place to live, and then there's only allocated so much. So sometimes they still have to have money to make up the difference, and they may or may not have that. And so, you know, it comes back to that affordable housing.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question because
Yeah.
I keep reading and hearing on the news that they've got $1 gazillion and they're trying to put to use, and we're saying, well, we could use some of those.
Yeah. Well, according to the government, they have lots of gazillion dollars. But we're paying $6 a gallon for gas.
Yeah, let's not forget to vote for Biden. I'm not supposed to talk politics up here.
A couple things I would say is, and I don't know the entire situation with the sprinklers at House of Hope, but I know Ted's very creative. He worked with us as far as putting sprinklers in our houses, and there is a need for that service that they provide, and maybe just get some really smart people to come together and see what new innovative products are out there, and figure out how to get community buy-in for it, and try to get that funded. But agree, you need life-saving measures, but just maybe there's ways to do that.
Yeah.
More costly.
Well, I've lived here long enough to know that this community is just chock full of very smart people,
Exactly.
innovative people.
Yep, exactly. So,
Brian, while you're up here, can you give us your thoughts on CORE?
like Marietta, here's the thing. There was a study done in 2016 in Australia. They looked at all different kinds of recovery type programs, from Christ-centered ones to NA to just a variety of programs. And after 3 years, the average recovery was 13%. And so if CORE's saying 15% is their success rate, then they're above average. The challenge is typically when an individual falls out of a program, whether it's CORE or Simmering or any of the other ones, they've burned their bridges from where they've come from, right? So to put them on a bus ticket, give them a bus ticket to go back to where they came from, it's probably not their best option, because their family has sent them to recovery because they've burned those bridges. The courts have sent them there because they've burned those bridges. And so we may need to have a different solution. So I'll just give you a little history. In 1920, there was several experiments done, but some with rats in a cage. Put a rat in a cage with 2 bottles of water. One bottle was regular water. The other bottle had a drug of either heroin or cocaine in it. That rat would inevitably drink from the drug bottle of water and overdose and die. 1970, a psychologist from Vancouver by the name of Bruce Alexander came along, and he said, let's look at the cage. And he designed what he called rat park, and he put lots of rats in the cage, and he gave them lots of things to do, and he gave them plenty of cheese and balls to push around and wheels to spin in and tons of friends. And he put those same 2 bottles of water in that cage. None of the rats drank from the drugged bottle. None of the rats overdosed and died. And so what that shows you is the power of community. And so is there a way, when these individuals maybe fall out of a program, to surround them with community support systems so that even though they fell out of this program, they still have a community of relationships around them to help foster success? And you can look at Portugal, and I don't know that this is the solution, but Portugal started looking at the rate of money that they were putting in recovery programs, because recovery is very much downstream, right? It's the addiction happens, and then we're going to treat the problem and recovery. And they decided to make a switch, and they began taking all the money that they were putting into recovery and putting it at the front end. They've seen overdoses cut in half. They've seen the number of people addicted cut in half. And they've seen more community support so that people don't become addicted on the front end. And so as just a community, are there other things that we can think about as these individuals fall out of those programs to surround them with support services? And some of that could just be dialogue. Dialoguing with CORE to say, hey, if this individual gets kicked out for relapse, maybe their first step is to meet with a borough counselor. Let's help them stay connected to those resources. So just a thought.
That's a great thought. Thank you. Our meeting is drawing long. I know during study sessions it's typical that those in the audience are not invited to speak. I'm going to change the decorum of that and ask the question. If there's anybody in the audience that'd like to come up, we would like to hear from you. But if you would, under one condition, what we don't want to hear is a lot of complaining. What I'd like to hear is some ideas, some possible solutions, some things to think about outside the box. Like I said, this isn't a Branson problem, right? This is the nationwide problem. But are there any ideas out there, any creative ideas or things that you haven't heard of today that you think would be worth just kicking around? Okay, to avoid a stampede, we need a single file line. Okay. Here comes, thank you, Brian.
I'll get it started. This is a Branson problem, right? We don't need to rely on the federal government, the state government. We need to solve this as Branson, and that is community involvement. And so we need to bring the community to the table to address these issues, but not with meetings. I like to use the example of if we have an old dilapidated house over here and we get together and we talk about how we're going to transform that house, and we come up with some ideas, and we get together the next week and we talk some more about how to transform that house, and we get together the next week and we talk about different ways to transform that house. Guess what? That house never gets transformed. We've met about it. We've had some great ideas. But until we either A, have a financial commitment, and B, have the people to actually dig in and do the work, the house stays dilapidated. And as a community, we've got to come together on these issues and be an example maybe for our nation, right? Of how everybody's got different ideas, everybody's got all, lots of compassion and all that, but let's just start putting it in action. Let's just try something. I know that about 10 years ago, the city of Springfield was addressing their homeless problem. They didn't have a solution. They came up with a plan. And you know what? They threw it against the wall and said, this is what we've come up with, and it may or may not work. And they've moved the needle a little bit. It hasn't been drastic, but they've learned along the way, and they weren't paralyzed by fear or inaction. They did something. And I think that's the point that we're at now. We need to rally the community compassion and hearts to spend that extra hour or 2 hours or 5 hours a week and be part of the solution by coming alongside individuals. And we'll help in that process. We would love to teach and train, because sometimes people are just afraid. They don't know what to do. We can teach and train some of that. We're willing to do that, but it's going to take a community-wide effort to make a significant change in these issues. And we can't depend on nonprofits or social service agencies or big government to do that. It's going to take all of us to do that. And so that would be the challenge I would ask from you, Mayor, is put that out to our community. Let's really get people, let's pick one problem maybe, and let's get everybody on board with trying to solve that.
I'm going to accept that challenge. I'm going to ask Chena to set up a meeting with yourself, Leela, Marietta, all those that we can get into a room, invite the public, and I want to start having those meetings, because the worst thing we could do is sit here for 2.5 hours, have this discussion, and everybody go back to their home, and it just keeps going on and on,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I know this board is very interested in taking action, and so we're going to make that happen.
That's fantastic.
Right, Lisa?
Yes, Your Honor. I guess I had an additional thought to that too, is sometimes the larger groups, I mean, this is kind of what this group is about right now.
Yeah.
that sometimes maybe breaking it down into the wards or something where there's some smaller groups of people and there's some more personal relationships that they could get, some of the aldermen may know how to reach to those people. So just another consideration, because these large groups on a specific day sometimes are tough for people to make. We have to post, get a quorum, we have this formal process, and that turns people off. I mean, I've had that conversation that government is tough on people. So I don't know what the aldermen think about, but that might be another level to go to that may be, I mean, I'm not put that burden on the alderman, but just another thought.
Lisa, I think that's an excellent solution, because what we don't need is a formal setting, right? With us
Right.
sitting up here. And so that's an excellent solution. If we did it by a ward basis, where we only had 2 aldermen present, it could be very, very informal, and more of a discussion and open dialogue. And because the sole goal is to find the actions and put the plans into place, no matter how small they are,
Yep.
everything to help turn this ship that we're trying to turn.
Yeah, and I think we have to be realistic. It's not going to be a quick process.
What do you mean? I understand that. But Lisa, you raise a good point. I mean, there are some people that don't feel comfortable in this kind of a formal setting. So I'll follow your lead, Lisa, and let's go that route. Great idea.
Can I?
Oh, sure.
Now, the last town halls we did, it was less than.
We had 42 people.
In 3 meetings.
I'm not necessarily saying that it would be relying on just the public. The difference here is we're going to be getting together with these experts and putting action plans together. For example,
Yeah, no,
I just can't wait to put this Have a Heart, Give Smart into, but we would invite the public, and you're right, we don't have big turnouts at those.
It was,
but-
yeah, it was not
But
good.
it really wouldn't be for the sole purpose of the public. It would be gathering the brainstorming of those that can help make a difference.
So I would just offer that I don't know that necessarily a
For
new
those
meeting
online,
needs
this
to
is
be.
Marietta.
Oh, sorry, this is Marietta. I would just offer that I don't know that there needs to be new meetings, because a lot of those meetings are already happening. We have Ozark Mountain Country Cares who are bringing together those work groups that are specifically focused on these issues. We have Ozark's Wellness Network that brings together those agencies where some of those discussions can happen. So, you know, adding another meeting to everyone's
Good.
plate is a lot to ask. Maybe you could just start participating in some of the things that are already happening, modeling those behaviors for the community, encouraging them to follow your lead and be a part of those organizations, and then kind of let it take off from there.
Marietta, thank you so much for getting up and saying that. It's people like you that when you get up and share and you provide information like that, it makes us a better place. But you're absolutely right. If you have meetings after meetings after meetings, let's not have another meeting. So then I'm going to ask if you would provide, Lisa, provide us
we can
with
connect with
a
Lisa.
list of where the meetings are and the times and that, and then between myself and the board, we will start attending those. Thank you very much for saying that.
Sure.
And maybe a press release from the city mentioning these places that, you know,
I think-
the places that are here, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
informing them that what we talked about today and the places that, because you're saying get the community involved and let the community know where they can get involved, right?
Yeah.
Or who to reach out to.
Yeah.
Can we put that on our webpage, maybe the front page, or your contact
Absolutely.
information, everything?
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, I
You
think
agree
the
with
more
that,
people
Brian?
that we can educate in the community to drive them towards the experts that are already doing the work, you're
Yes.
just going to build up what they're already doing. So.
Thank you so much for saying that. Any other questions or comments? Here comes the chief.
One last comment, Mayor, and that's appreciation for you and the board to maintain the 1:30 meeting today. Our professionals are very busy. I know
Sure.
Marietta schedules 6 months out in advance, and asking her to change her schedule on the fly is something that's very difficult. Brian as well is very, very busy. And I led off today with the 3 points. The third one being, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at the actions that are already in place in our community by the experts and our community partners. And I think that what you heard today is we're on the right path. We're just not to our destination yet.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think getting the community involved and that is, it will just help us get another step down the road. But you're right, Chief. I am very, very appreciative of what I've heard today of the things that are in place. And I somewhat agree with you that the homeless and panhandling isn't a direct mission that for city government. But I do believe if the city has resources that we could help with resolving this, maybe directly, the immediate city direct response would be when we're dealing with hypodermic needles and drugs and safety problems with aggressive panhandlers, or the homeless is bothering issues or leaving their hypodermic needles out. So from a police standpoint, that would be the direct effect. But this board is very willing and able and wanting, is thirsty to get involved and help resolve these issues.
Mayor, one clarification. When I said it's not our direct focus, it's not our mission. When I addressed you with the annual report, and we were talking about our crime numbers, I made the comment, you pay me to address real crime and the fear of crime. Far too often, when we see panhandlers or homeless issues, that sparks my fear of crime, and that's what you pay me to address as well. So that's the reason why we have partnerships like these right here that are working on those issues behind the scene.
Well said. Okay. Any other comments on the board? If not, I would entertain an motion.
I'll just say one more thing. And because it's a surprise as to how many organizations are actively doing things, I think it's the messaging needs to be out there, because a lot of us have been involved in the community from a business standpoint, and then also now at a governmental standpoint. And some of this is new information to me, and I'm in the healthcare field. So, that messaging being pushed out, not just, this is one step of it, but, that needs to happen a little more. And, yeah, but great work. Thank you guys so much.
I'd like to give you all applause for helping our community. Thank you, everybody. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.